Hello, everybody. It's BJ Miller here and Alexandra Drane. Me from Mettle Health, Alex from Archangels, and we're here just to do the follow-up remaining questions that we didn't get to on our webinar that we just recorded, all about caregiving during the ho-ho holidays. So anyway, good to see everybody again. Over to you, Sonia, for those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Great. And I just have to say, BJ, I love that we should have taken the minute in between those two things to be like, okay, Sonia, what are the questions so we can prepare? But we did not.
Oh.
So here we are again, completely like, whatever you hit us with, here we are.
Preparation's overrated.
Amen.
Okay, so this first one said, I find myself sometimes torn between offering just support versus voicing how the path of projected illness looks like. This comes from me being a nurse. Actively working on allowing the conversation to just be what the caregivers are feeling versus trying to offer guidance from the medical standpoint. How can I bridge the gap between nursing and doula with every client? Do you have any pointers on resisting the urge to say, be prepared, or tell people what to do?
Ooh, I can jump in there, Alex. Do you mind if I'll start us off?
I think you're way more prepared. You're more, this is a question for you.
Yeah, okay. Well, so I hear that. I feel that tension too. As a professional provider, we know things and we can look around corners, and there are patterns to how illnesses play out. And if we've been doing our work well and for a while, we'll know those patterns. And in these ways, to some degree, we can predict something of the future. We can have a sense of the roadblocks and challenges coming people's way, even before they know. And it's tricky to know what to do with that knowledge because A, we can be wrong. Sometimes we don't know everything, far from it, of course. Two, we can end up, forecasting miseries that then feel like self-fulfilling prophecies. And three, of related, of course, there's what's superstition almost by naming these things, then they happen. So it's really tricky. And so just to note that, I think in general, when you're kind of holding your tongue and wondering which hat to put on, doula, i.e. supporter, or nurse, i.e. projector, in this for imperfect words, but for here, is to just catch yourself. And one trick is to say, hey, mom, dad, person, would it be helpful, putting my nurse hat on for a moment, would it be helpful, because I see some things and what we're all going through here is unique in some ways and not unique in others. And would it be helpful to kind of project a little bit into the future and game things out is a phrase that comes up, or just sort of contingency plan a little bit, just so we don't accidentally stumble into things and make them harder than they need to be. Something like that. But essentially what you're doing is telling them that you're role switching with that hat and asking them if they want to go into this sort of prognostic future guesswork. That usually then they'll say, that gives them a little warning too. And then when however they respond, follow their lead. And then they're driving it. It's not happening to them. You're not foisting hard news on them. You're not, negative thinking or whatever else you might get accused of. So that would be the generic way to handle those kind of moments. And of course, that just the trick there is for you is self-awareness when you're being which hat's being tugged on for you, and just the ability to communicate and defer to their experience by asking them permission versus just blurting it out. Usually that gets us through just about any situation pretty well.
It's funny when Antonio's sister was diagnosed with glioblastoma, I called my mom and was like, what is this? What does this mean? And he was at the bedside with her. This is the morning after we'd been hitched, right? Like she was 32 with a 2.5-year-old baby. And I remember walking down this like light streaming hall of Mass General, and my mom saying to me on the phone, like, stage 4 glioblastoma, I'm Googling it. And she's like, oh, Alex, like this is bad. And I remember she told me, and I remember going back to Antonio and saying, do you want me to tell you what I know? And he said, absolutely not. He was Sicilian. And in Sicilian culture, to talk about death is to bring death. To talk about illness is to bring illness. So for 4 months of the 7 months she lived, we did not talk about the fact that she was dying or that she had a terminal illness. And then with Za, that was making me crazy because I had this beautiful 2.5-year-old niece. And I was like, what does she, Anthony's like, you are not allowed to bring this up. You cannot talk to her about it. And finally I said, I'm going to ask an expert. I asked one of the experts at Mass General. I was like, I feel so torn because I want to say to her, do you want to write letters to Alessia? Like, what do you want? And I feel like I should tell her. And the woman said just what you said, BJ. She said, you need to ask her, you need to say to her, if I were in your position, this is what I would want. What do you want? And the resounding answer from Za is, I don't want to know at all. Mm-hmm. And then when I had my own health thing, I had Susanna, actually. I didn't want to go online. I didn't want to go look. I wanted advice from other people who had brain surgery. It turns out that I had a brain tumor, but I didn't want to do the thumbing through it. And Susanna actually went and did the research for me, culled through it, and then told me what I wanted to know. So it might be that your parents would say, I do want to, your mom would say, I want to know this. I don't want to know the bad stuff. I want to know what I can affect. I don't want to know what I can't affect, right? You can give her choices on what you can share back.
Right on. Beautiful. And that, as you're pointing out, there are individual overlays here and there are cultural overlays here. There's a lot to ferret out. And the big news is we're both pointing out, you don't have to know the answer. You simply just ask, and that will pull you through. So right on.
Yes. We're in a culture now where we're supposed to ask everything anyway, right? My 15-year-old son, like, you have to ask again, ask again, ask again. Like, you just can't ask enough in any situation about what somebody feels comfortable with.
Yeah, it's a good habit to be getting into one way and another. Righto. Okay, voice of God, back to you.
Great. Okay, so next one says, I was wondering if you can suggest any strategies to tackle bottled up resentment towards your care receiver, especially the thought of, oh, if I wasn't spending this much energy, money, and time on this person, my life would have been so much easier and better.
Want me to take a first stab at that one? Because I have a situation that was.
Go for it.
So with a person that I was caring for, over a period of time, I got madder and madder and madder. And I thought that wasn't coming across. And I acted like everything was fine. And then I was on a holiday actually with this person, and I was reading a book that had the perspective of the caregiver, but about halfway through the book, it started to talk about what it was like to be the person who has a caregiver, who needs a caregiver, what it is like to have, insert whatever it was. And there was literally everything about my life in that moment literally changed when I stopped thinking about what it meant for me. And I instead was like, what would it be like if I were in this situation? How would I feel if I were the one who needed this care with this clinical condition? And I became a mushy gushy mess. And the other thing that was interesting is this particular situation, my bottled up, I thought was not hidden frustration, was creating anxiety on the part of this person I was caring for. And it was exacerbating their condition. We both had the best intentions. But here I was like, I'm not gonna talk about it, but secretly my face was tight. And they were like stressed out, and it was making everything worse on both sides. And the second I got soft, that secondary impact went away for them. And we were both incredibly healthier. And so I think just actually it sounds so cliche, but if you can, in those moments, it's hard to do, put yourself into the shoes of what it would be like to need this care, you might soften to some degree for some period of time.
So right on. I mean, you're making the point that empathy and compassion is also part of our own self-care. So if we take this as a challenge to the caregiver's self-care, the person asking the question, resentment's building as we're talking, and even if she's just trying to look out for herself in that moment, one of the really important ways to do that is through empathy and compassion for the other side of this coin, just like you're pointing out. That actually helps you not stuff or repress your resentments or hard feelings or whatever else. It's not a cue to put their needs ahead of yours, but rather to have a more evolved or refined understanding of the dynamic playing out. like you say, will very likely soften your angst to some degree. But there still may be need for you to say to this person, hey, you know what? I got to talk to you about something. I love being a caregiver. I love whatever. I love being here with you. And I can only imagine what it's like for you. But can we talk about something here, because this is a real relationship and I want this to be a real relationship. And so we both got to speak up, and here's how I'm feeling, or when you do this, I end up going this way, and finding a way. So I'm super with you, Alex, that this compassion will help soften the edges and ease the dynamic. And still, we also have to tend to the whatever feelings are coming up for you. Some of those, many, maybe all with some people, can be shared with the care receiver, and that's the right place to work it out. And sometimes it just may be if the person doesn't have the capacity to understand your piece of the puzzle or articulate things, or just super, super sick, you may need to find that support and chip away at that resentment with a therapist or with a friend or somebody else other than the person receiving your care. But one way or another, this is not an invitation to repress or snuff your feelings. It's a matter of contextualizing them and then seeking the help you need.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
All right. Speaking of amen, God.
Final question here. This person said, with COVID complexities, it feels like we need to learn and share self-care, in this case, grieving, healing rituals that we can practice and share. Can either of you share ideas of what might work?
Well, I'll just jump. I mean, grieving, so gosh, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I'm hoping comes out of our time now is in this big shared existential crisis that we all come to terms with, gosh, just how vulnerable we all are, just how precarious life is, just how amazing life is, just how little control we have, and yet we have some, and we should pay attention to that. We should get a sense of who we are underneath all this, the veneer of our accomplishments and our tasks and our busyness. Like, who are we underneath this sort of constructed self? The existential crisis is really good to shake us down to that sort of irreducible nub of a self underneath it all. So getting in touch with all of those things, I'm hoping has a way, if you go there, if you play out these existential crises, they tend to soften us, they tend to open us, they tend to be very painful. Shedding things is painful, but at the end of it, if you hang in there and you get the support you need, you might find yourself opening to all sorts of new levels of appreciation. But to get there, grief is a really key piece of the puzzle. You have to have this metabolic process to carry you through the transition, to move from sort of sufferer to elation, from loser to winner, or pick your words, to loser or gainer or something like that. But you need to, yeah, sure, great. And you need to have some process. You don't do that in an instant. We are mushier, gooier, emotional beings than that. This is not a rational thing, and we need to understand grief to give ourselves the time and the space to move through these things, to honor what we've lost, and to reacquaint ourselves with all that we still have. That's grief. And I'm hoping that our times reacquaint us with this magical thing called grief, which over the 20th century was reduced by medicalized thinking and others as this thing that you're supposed to be sad for a few hours and then get your ass back on the horse and keep going. So I don't even know if that answers the question, except to just make a case for grief. I think you asked about rituals. So there are groups doing things online, like the Let's Reimagine group has online vigils. It's an interesting place to go and share your experience online. There are other organizations, I'm sure, doing some of that. But I guess I would point you back to, this may be a time to reacquaint yourself with cultural traditions that you come from, or religious traditions that you come from, even if you've left those traditions behind. This can be a really beautiful time to reapproach your faith or reapproach your cultural tradition, because they probably have something to say about how to deal with loss like this. So that's a good idea. Go back to your roots. And the last thing is to go inward, go to yourself, the place where all these connections actually play out. I'm connected to Alex. The source of that connection to you, Alex, is really in me. So even if I can't see you, if I'm missing you, I should go to myself. I go inward. I tend to that connection that's in me. That's what I think a lot of us should be doing too, is go inward, tend to ourselves where this nidus of connection is. And then lastly, I would just invite everybody to invent your own rituals. If you've been cleared, the sort of secular way we've been going may have detached us from a lot of ancient traditions. Well, like I said, we can reacquaint ourselves with that, or we can make some new ones. So there's a creative moment here. So whether it's a candle or a shrine in your home or a time of day, I have this little ritual I've shared with some folks about my sister who died 21 years ago. Whenever I see a repeating number, that's a moment I stop and I think of Lisa for whatever reason. So if it's 2:22 and I happen to look at the clock, that's me with Lisa for that minute. So that's not a cultural thing, it's just made up, but it means something to me. And that's where I get to have a living relationship with this person.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so pretty. I'm obsessed with the number 11 and I've passed it on, but I love that idea of thinking about it in the context of assigning it to somebody or people and loving on them through that. That's so pretty. So I think, that let me then answer in a different way, which is this is grieving after a loss. If you are in the process of being a caregiver, before you're at that stage, people will say, you need respite. Go take a break. And we've done a lot of work in the area of respite. And let's do another one of these on the topic of respite in particular.
Yes.
What I see happen all the time, and what I myself have felt when somebody has suggested to me in a moment of high intensity, when I am off the chart red, you should take a break. You should do yoga. You should, I want to be like, you should, right? Like, so when you are in the stage that you have, when you really are grieving and you can reflect in the way that BJ, you just laid out so beautifully, that there's nothing else to say about that. It's before you get there, give yourself a break and know that 30 seconds might be all you need. If you can't take an hour, you can't take a day. Good Lord, you can't take a weekend. Start saying, every time it's 2:22, 1:11, 3:33, I'm going to take 30 seconds and I'm going to breathe and I'm going to remind myself that I'm doing the best I can, right? That is like on the opposite end of the spectrum when you're still in the thick of it and you need self-care and you can't get it. Invent ways, even 30 seconds. And I'm going to start doing that. I'm taking your number thing and I'm going to, every time I see it, I'm going to make myself do 30 seconds of like go into my belly. It's okay. Everything will be okay. I'm not alone. All these things, all these mantras.
Beautiful. I'm with you. And it doesn't need to be much. I mean, just got to make a toe hold somewhere. It's all we really need. It doesn't need to be much. That can stop the slide. So, yeah, right on.
I'm guessing you see that all the time when you're on that side of it, right? And you're walking into a house where everything is on fire and you couldn't suggest to this person, let's get you a vacation. Like, right? What you're finding ways to help them find a moment.
Yeah, that's right. A moment, and that's the right word for it. It's not a unit of time. It's an experience. It's a moment, not a minute, a moment.
Yeah, love that. BJ, I know the voice of God is going to tell us we have to be quiet. I was thinking about one more thing, and I'm sure you are too. I love this. And what an honor for you and I to be given the great gift of hearing these questions. And I, selfishly speaking, I'm processing for myself as I listen to you, as I listen to the questions, as I reflect on my own experiences, that it is care, right? That is in and of itself working things through. And I'm guessing you feel the same way. To everyone who is part of this, thank you. Like, we really do love you. That sounds super dorky, but like, you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. Just think about how many stories came out so quickly. You could stop anyone on the street. BJ, I know you do this. We go wing walking. Like, everyone has these gorgeous stories. And the more we can share them with each other, give each other an excuse to have it, to know that they're not alone in it, the more we will help change culture.
Right on. And I so agree with you. That's why I love doing these. We get these sort of tender people bring us into these very tender, intimate moments. It's so beautiful. So I'm with you, Alex. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this way and letting us in. And yeah, we're not here as experts who know things you don't know. We're here as fellow travelers, fellow confused people, fellow overwhelmed people. We've just seen enough to know that to believe that we're actually not alone. I just want you to believe that too.
Yeah, exactly. Amen, voice of God.
Yeah, right.
I was just going to agree with everything you guys said. Thanks so much for answering all these extra questions, and thanks everyone for checking out this video. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everybody.